Good afternoon, and thank you, Kirby, and certainly I want to thank the organizers for inviting me for this opportunity to address and educate all of us about dealing with risk perceptions and communicating about them. I heard part of the symposium this morning. I also had an opportunity to speak with a few people last night at that nice steak fry in the gas patch, and so I picked up a lot of ideas there, and I keep hearing this word communication, and I know with this this legislation that was signed yesterday into law, it's perhaps even more relevant that we're able to communicate concerns back and forth across both sides of these issues. So with that, I'd like you just to sit back, enjoy your lunch, and I'll walk you on this story about how we go about this. I want to give you some ideas about how it can help you do your business better. Okay, great. So there are really three things I'd like to think about from today's presentation. One is, can we improve? Can we do better than we're doing now? I would hope the answer is yes, it always is. How can we compete in this environment? Social media, there's activists, there's people, who professional job is to pursue one side of an issue. How can we compete in that environment with what we have? And then if we can compete, what are the best tools and techniques in order to do that? And I'm going to talk about those as well today. I used to work at the World Health Organization. I was a member of international staff. And the Director General of WHO said, this is a quote at a meeting, he said that, we've done really well in the lab in controlling outbreaks, but actually we've only really understood that its communications are as critical to outbreak control as lab analyses or epidemiology. This is the Director General of the World Health Organization making that statement back in 2005. So communications is a big part of what we do, and very, very important. The guiding principles are kind of simple. It's anticipation. Most of this can be anticipated, and it can be prepared for, preparation, in advance, and practice, APP. And I try to keep the presentations I'll show, they tend to have a simplistic and three-message nature to them for a distinct reason, and I'll talk about why that's so important as I get into the talk. I want to first I go back to my Navy days just slightly for a second. I was in the U.S. Navy. There's something called PPP, or the 7 Ps, and that means proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So now I know you'll remember it. So Will Rogers kind of put this well in terms of dealing with a high concern, low trust issue, which is really, when risk and crisis communication gets involved, it's almost always an issue like that, high concern, low trust. And he made this quote, is that when people are stressed or upset or concerned, they actually want to know that you care before they care anything about what you know or what you're going to say. And that connection is critical. If you miss that connection, your chance of a successful outcome drops by 50% or more, if at all, if you have any chance. Janet Napolitano was the former Homeland Secretary. She went to Berkeley, California, had a lot of problems there, and she quoted this back in April a couple years ago. She said, it's critical for those communicating a crisis get a second opinion. And she talks about a crisis and says it's, basically it's incumbent on executives to get a second opinion from a risk crisis communication expert. And I think that's like where our CEO completely missed the bullet. And I do think in high concern, low trust, high profile, critical issues, it's really important to engage outside help to get you through. And I'll give you some examples of where that has helped. So in risk and crisis communication, which is really what this is based on, we often think of it in terms of the media, and I'm going to talk a lot about in terms of the media, then I'm also going to talk about in terms of more local. Be first, be right, be credible. Being first these days is pretty difficult because things move so fast. But it's important to be there. You need to be right, you need to be credible. It's important to inform, not inflame. It's important to address rumors, inaccuracies, misperceptions quickly. The only thing is the speed, like I said. 20 years ago, it took a day for the news cycle to go through, a day. Imagine having a day. 10 years ago, it was 4 hours. 3 years ago, it was 4 minutes. Today, I don't know. Tomorrow, you tell me. And what is this proliferation of sources? Social medias, everybody's a source now. What I find striking is the earthquake of 2011, from Washington to New York, Twitter got there 15 seconds faster than the seismic waves. So if you think you can beat that, let me know. I'd like to hear about it. So that's the world we're in, okay? That's just where we are. When breaking bad news or high concern, low trust communication, the goal ultimately, and always is trust. I heard that this morning several times. I heard trust mentioned, is always trust. Without trust, you have nothing. With trust, you have power. You have the ability to get things done and get your message out. You must have trust. From trust, you get your credibility. And most people evaluate credibility or trust by silently asking themselves these three questions. They say, can I trust this person? Is he or she committed? Does this person really care about what happens to me and my family? And I think for the issues that that's this purpose of this symposium, these are very relevant. And the goal, of course, is yes for each question. And I'm going to tell you right now that you've been asking yourself those questions about me. Subconsciously, probably, but you are. We all do it. And this applies everywhere. It actually applies even at home. Does everybody know that we like to do this marital bad news exercise? According to research, there's 7 major topics of, sort of marital and family arguments. Who can guess them? Money, politics, sex, yeah. What else? In-laws, yeah. Job, yeah. I think I heard it. Well, you guys know. Everybody knows. They're obvious. Money, children. Work versus family, in-laws, division of labor and home, intimacy, sex, and of course communication. So actually, what I'm talking about today can also apply tonight for you, right? And as you undoubtedly will have to wrestle with one of these at some point, if not in the very near future. So what makes high concern, low trust so special? If I show you this picture, just think, what is it? Just think about how it makes you might feel. This picture and this picture. What is it? Fear. Yeah, it's obvious. It's one of the most dominant emotions there is fear. Why is this fight or flight? Right? The saber-toothed tiger jumped out of the jungle in front of you. If you want to stay in the gene pool, you better be gone, right? Of course, there's not so many saber-toothed tigers anymore. But the fears are still there. We're still wired the same. The tigers went away. So it's fear. And actually, there's been a lot of research done on this. This is a side shot of the brain. Most of our thinking is in the frontal cortex. It's very logical, et cetera. But in that fight or flight, the hypothalamus and the amygdala just take over. They hijack the whole thing, and people go crazy. Or their brain doesn't work right anymore. And unfortunately, in a high concern, low trust setting, this is the brain that we're dealing with. It's not the logical brain. It's this one. And so we have to, oh, well, it's too hard. No, it's not too hard. We can do it, and I'm going to help you try to understand techniques to do it well. In that high concern, low trust setting, we've evaluated trust factors. And if you look at the red circle, half circle, listening, caring, empathy, compassion is 50% of the input into trust. 50%. Okay? Your competence, your expertise, the Dow CEO, 15%. That's honesty, openness, 15%, 20, whatever, 15, 20. Factor X, we don't know. But if you give away that listening, caring, empathy, compassion, which I think everybody in this room would probably agree that CEO gave away, you've given over half of your ability to establish trust away. Half. And honesty, open, caringness, he's probably given over more, a majority. So that's just not a winning probability for me. And what's really scary is that listening, caring, empathy, compassion is assessed in the first 90 to 30 seconds. It's almost immediate. And if you miss it, it's really hard to get it back. So some concepts for breaking bad news or high concern, low trust. When people are stressed or anxious, caring before knowing. We talked about that. Primacy and recency. People tend to remember what you said first and what you said last. Everything else in the middle gets sort of lost. The brain is like, it's not there. So if you have a message that's an uncomfortable message, the second one is the place to put it. the one in the middle. Mental noise is a big deal. Everybody has experienced mental noise. You know, your brain just shuts down, right? You know, mental noise, was your 16-year-old daughter's out with a car after 11 or something, I don't know, whatever. We've all experienced mental noise. Mental noise, 80% reduction in brain capacity, we all know that. There's a tool that we developed called the message map that I'm going to talk about extensively. It's sort of a cornerstone of how to talk in high concern, low trust. And really 3 key messages is what it's based on. It's actually a total of an average of 27 words, takes about 9 seconds to verbalize. And again, 3 messages. We call the 2793 format with supporting details to support each key message. And then when you map it out, it looks something like this. The stakeholder question or concern might be up here at the top. I think there's a few of those I could fill in just from listening to your symposium right now. But you might have 3, so whatever the question or concern is, you have 3 key messages, 1, 2, and 3, not about 9 words each, and then you have supporting details to support each key message. And that's the message map. It's actually quite simple. It's hard to do, though. They're hard to write. They're hard to write short. And that's what it looks like. This is one thing that we use extensively in almost all of our work. There's 10 principles behind. I want to talk about them because it's important. Like again, a maximum of 3 to 5. Sometimes you go to 5 messages. We don't prefer that. 3 is the best. It has to be written at a low grade, 6th to 8th grade level, because that's where, remember, the mental noise factor. Primacy and recency, the first and the last messages are what people are going to remember. You need to cite third parties that are perceived as credible. It's important to have genuine empathy, listening, caring, and compassion. It's important that empathy is genuine. If it's not genuine, it's not there. Graphics, visual aids, analogies, narratives can help with mapping. There's a concept of negative dominance. We tend to remember the negative. If it's something that scares us or it's a negative, we usually have to balance that with 3 pieces of positive information. So we call that 1N equal 3P. This concept of repetition, the 3 T's, tell me more, tell me again. We tend to learn things by repetition is very important. Perception, people have very strong perceptions. I'll talk about those later in the talk. And each message needs to stand alone. You don't need to have read the other part to understand the next one. We use this message mapping to develop risk communication guides for some issues. It's sort of like a top questions, simple answers guides. We usually work with a group of key stakeholders, identifying key questions, creating these answers with input and review from them. We've done this for all kinds of settings, pandemic, Zika, opioid. We're doing one for opioid right now. Done a lot for FDA product approvals. You know, it's really a useful tool. This is what one looked like that we used for Zika. This is, it's on the web. I think it's one of the most popular downloads for this particular organization. I'm just going to pull a page out here. So this is, we got the top questions and we developed these message map style answers. So here's one of them. This was the Zika epidemic, which you probably remember a couple of years ago. It was in the news, which is why we were involved. So one of the common questions was, if a woman thinks she had been exposed to Zika, how long should she wait before trying to become pregnant? Very relevant question because Zika had what caused birth defects. And so we developed these very quickly. A short answer here. Women and men should avoid getting or causing pregnancy for 8 weeks after returning from a Zika area. If exposure to Zika is suspected and women desiring pregnancy should use effective contraception. A previous Zika infection is unlikely to cause birth defects in future pregnancies. That's the message map. That's the 3 key messages. First one's a little long, but we had to do this fast. Like I said, the hard part is writing them tight, write short. And then each one of these has a longer answer that supports it, because somebody might, this short answer here can actually be expressed in the duration of a soundbite. It gets carried, tends not to get edited, so it's very effective in getting your core story out. But people, oh, well, I want to know more. Then you can, oh, of course, we'll give you the longer answer. So should avoid getting or causing pregnancy for 8 weeks? Yeah, so it turns out that men with symptoms of Zika should avoid causing pregnancy for 6 months. The bloodstream is likely free within 7 days and so on. And it's really important because often in a high concern, low trust setting, people want to say everything they know, you know? And the problem is that the audience just isn't ready to hear that. They can't. Their brain is, you know, mental noise. So this layered answer is really effective. And we use it again and again and again and again. And every time it's used well, I've been very pleased with what's happened. And so you say, oh gosh, how do we know all the questions? Well, guess what? Many of them can be predicted. I imagine for some of the issues you're discussing, some of the questions are pretty obvious. You can develop message maps for them. We developed the 77 questions for a disaster. We just looked through the media, and we found the 77 most frequently asked questions. It's in our book that's published. Will be in the materials, not the book, but the link to it. It's a free download from the WHO, so it's worth getting it. But questions tend to be factual or informational questions, or they can be emotionally charged questions, or they be challenge, trap, and pitfall questions, the gotchas. So I'll talk about those in just a minute. I want to give you a little bit more on the key concepts. Again, there's this concept of one negative has to be balanced with 3 positives. The 1n equal 3p. It's very, very important. People tend to go to multiple sources of information to confirm what they think. This is really common with social media. Social media tends to be a place people go to confirm beliefs they already hold. All right? They don't go there seeking new information. They go there to seek to confirm what they already believe. Preparation, of course, being essential. It's a current theme. Again and again, you'll hear that from me today. About the negatives. The no's, the nots, the nevers, the nothings, the nones. These are words best avoided in a high concern, low trust setting because our brain has a hard time dealing with them because it's the antonym test, right? Remember how that was always harder than the synonym test? Because you have to read it, then you have to invert it. And that's really hard to do. Even hard to do sometimes normally, but imagine when you're afraid. And so it's best to avoid this. It's best to express things in the positive when possible. Also, the absolutes are scary. The always, the nevers, the guarantees. The one thing you can guarantee your efforts. You can guarantee things you can control. I can guarantee you that we're going to do everything we can. We're going to do every test we can. We're going to work as hard as we can to solve this problem, to meet your needs, things like that. Always and nevers are tough. Best avoided if possible. There's a couple quotes here for preparation. Abraham Lincoln, if I had all day to cut a large tree, I would spend most of the day sharpening my axe. And then this one I really like from Mark Twain. It takes me an average of 2 weeks to prepare an impromptu speech. So message maps, how do you do them? Well, you say, oh my gosh, what would I do? Well, you can prepare an overarching message. These can be a no-do-go message or trust benefits control. No-do-go is kind of easy when trust benefits control is another good message. Message 1 would have something that enables the person's trust in your organization or your initiative. Second one implies the benefits they receive, and then third one gives them a sense of control or trust benefits control. Informational messages are nice, but there's also challenge questions and messages because these, of course, are going to come up. And this is all to try to prepare somebody for this moment where all the cameras are blaring at you. You can't see anything except those camera lights. And suddenly you feel like your entire career, your entire bank account, your reputation, everything else is standing there right in front of you getting ready to evaporate. And that's a normal feeling. Everybody gets that. I don't care who you are, okay? And then you say, but I'm prepared, so I'll deal with it. So how do you do that? Well, again, back to the Will Rogers quote, when people are stressed and upset, they want to know that you care, so empathy is important. And if you do make that connection, you'll get the informational questions. And this comes from the Flint water crisis that we were involved with. These were what happens if you were able to, when people made that connection, they were kind of technical questions. What should be done? What's the implications of lead exposure? Why do we tolerate lead? How much is too much? It was sort of an opportunity for a scientific exchange, if you will. The problem is that people don't often get that emotional bonding. That empathy, remember, you only get 9 to 30 seconds. And if you don't, then the questions are going to be a little bit more aggressive. The false negatives, the guarantees, the what ifs, the speculation. Even Mayor Giuliani got sort of a speculation question, but he answered that well. So these challenge questions go from the informational to, you're poisoning my child. What are you going to do to help me? Who's going to pay for what you've done? My neighbor's ignoring my neighborhood because it's black and poor. And what's wrong with you? And you can imagine these questions could arise in some of the issues that you're dealing with right now. You actually can respond to these, and there's a technique. You sort of let the person ventilate. If it's an interview setting, the reporter is burning their nickel, not yours, by rattling on. You don't interrupt. Keep eye contact. You try to determine the underlying concerns, demonstrate understanding and empathy, deliver a conclusion, 2 or 3 facts to support the conclusion, the message map. Repeat the conclusion and talk about future actions. Also, it's important to bridge. These bridging statements are really, really useful. They're used a lot. And so when you're asked a question, you want to actually answer the question that you want to answer. And Politicians tend to do this, but they tend to ignore the bridge. They just go right off on their question they want to talk about, right? The problem is the audience has a hard, especially in the debate setting, the audience has a hard time following that because the conversation is broken, right? There's no conversation. Somebody fired a question, and this person just basically gave some answer. And this was really showed up in the 2016 debates. If you ever watched them closely, there was a lot of politicians who simply ignored any bridge whatsoever, and there was a few who didn't. The ones who didn't did very well, and who used them. So you say, what's the most important thing? I understand what this all boils down to. What needs to be emphasized? We need to look at the big picture. I understand your question. Here's the big picture. There's many bridging questions, statements. We've actually put a number of them in our book that's on this website that you can download it. The I don't know question, this is a very legitimate question. Maybe you don't know the answer. Maybe you can't give the answer. Maybe you're not authorized to give the answer. Maybe you do know the answer but can't give it right now. This is pretty common. Repeat the question. Find out what they're really asking. And that gives you, of course, time to think and think through it. Say you don't know, can't know, or wish you could answer. And then you give the reason and give a follow-up with a deadline. We did this quite a bit when I was at WHO because we hardly ever knew everything. We knew something, but not everything, so we had to be careful. And then, of course, bridge to what you can say. So yeah, what this really means is in this setting, here's what you need to know. And that's a very useful opportunity. Risk perceptions, they're not rational. If the risk is perceived as voluntary versus imposed by others, the voluntary is less riskful. Since cigarettes are considered voluntary, they're considered less, or motorcycles, that's less risky than asbestos or lead, which is considered to be involuntary. Mundane versus dramatic. Influenza is considered not as risky as pandemic, right? But pandemic, at least in recent history, there's 80,000 people who died of flu last year. Okay, the pandemic excess mortality was in numbers of tens. I feel sorry for everybody, but the influenza is actually more risky, if you will, than pandemic. But the perception is not that. Beneficial versus little benefit. Gasoline, because we use it to get places, et cetera, is far more beneficial or less risky than those horrible industrial chemicals that we don't know what they do. Even though they're the same, right? Natural versus man-made. This is kind of solar versus nuclear power. We could have a long debate on that, but there's still perception, of course. Familiar versus, this is the best one, auto versus air travel. Say, okay, unless you're on the certain models, recent models, air travel is inherently safe, right? But, have a safe flight, right? Okay, and the riskiest part is your Uber driver getting you to the airport on time, especially if you're like me and you're always late. So, I mean, this is this perception that drives it. And at the end of the day, perception may as well be reality. Okay. All right. So do statistics reassure? Oh yeah, 1 in a million. Yeah, but if it's you, it's 100%. So you got to be careful with statistics. I mean, I tend to go towards the percentages because the human mind can understand percentages a little bit easier than we can with one. Because one could be me. Well, that could be me. Only 2 out of 3 people are going to be okay. And well, wait a minute. So there's somebody sitting here, and there's me. Which one of us are going to die? That's where our mind goes, particularly if we're concerned. So statistics we can somehow manage a little bit better, or percentages. So I tend to use percentages. In a high concern setting, keep it simple. 3 bullets, please. 10 slides max. 20 minutes max. 30 words per slide. Don't go any further. No one will hear you. Moreover, you actually will hurt yourself because people will consider you to be insensitive or unaware or not meeting their concerns, even though that your intentions may be otherwise. Storytelling. This is huge. Every issue is a story. Okay, and journalists think about this a lot. It's the iron triangle: the hero, the villain, and the victim. Which one are you in this story? Okay, and whatever the story is, you're going to be one of those, and that's how the story is going to be written around you. And so you want to do things to help change your status. If you're being viewed as the villain, you want to do something to become the hero, right? Or to help address the needs of the victim or something like that. So it's very important to have an understanding of where are you in this and what can you do to maneuver yourself around that iron triangle. Storytelling is important. Story is really powerful. People remember a story much more quickly than remember almost anything else. So if you can tell your version, if you can get your messages your side of the story in a story, you'll get it much further. There's actually a number of studies on that support that conclusion. Social media. Cannot get away from it. This is 2008. This guy named Brian Solis did this, aperture of the social media outlets. He did it again in 2017. Many of them have changed. However, what is clear is that social media is here to stay, and it's really popular. This is the percentage of U.S. population who currently use any social media, and it's over 75%. Okay, and here's the most popular social networking apps in the United States as of just last year. Facebook with 170 million users making at least one monthly visit to that app. Now, there's never been a media source or a communication source with that kind of reach in history. So whether you like social media or not, it's interested in you. So we need to be aware of that and deal with it. And social media has power. Let me tell you, these are intense. They provide over 75% of message content, just the visuals of you. They're intensely and quickly noticed. They override verbal contact. People will be, if you're wearing a loud tie or crazy jewelry or something, they're going to be much more interested in that than they will be in what you're saying. And again, and they're always negatively interpreted. You never really win on nonverbals. But again, you want the attention to be to your message, not to you. In the high concern, low trust setting, let's go now to some practical matters. Transparency, education, outreach. This is what is important. How do you do it? Well, public meetings is one way. We always think of the town hall meeting. That's what our Dallas CEO did in electronic format. Didn't work out so well for him. Open house, poster station meeting, we're much more interested in those. We are. And then, of course, you also do a combination. Town hall meetings, the purpose of the meetings, of course, is deliver, exchange information to inform decision-making by both sides. Answer questions and answer stakeholder concerns early to prevent any adverse impacts. Challenges, of course, is the issues are very complex, like we're facing today. There's multiple stakeholders, diverse concerns, generally a lack of scientific knowledge or numeracy, emotions run high, and there's, of course, hidden and competing agendas. Some do's and don'ts. With the town hall meetings, the first do and don't is don't. If you remember one thing I say today, that's good enough, okay? My mission is done. Best avoided. You've seen them, okay? If unavoidable, sometimes they're unavoidable for all kinds of different reasons. Have a strong moderator, facilitator, ground rules, please, code of conduct, no longer than 1.5 hours. And try to have somewhat unobtrusive security, if you can, get them at least out of the room. And have a back door in case you need it, okay? So just warning. Alrighty. Here's a good example of a town hall gone bad. Not uncommon. There's actually a lot of video out there. Anyway, again, the town halls, the time constraint's a big problem. It's very easy for people to grandstand, take it over. It's a us versus them kind of thing. You primarily just get questions. You don't really get dialogue and interplay. And it's very difficult to recover from mistakes, so these are avoided. Okay, let's talk about other types of meetings. Open house, information exchange. These are a much better deal. Basically, a poster station where there's interaction opportunity is the simplest way to think about it. But it's like an open house, a forum. And do's and don'ts here is you can do it as a standalone or in combination with town hall if you really need to. Minimum 3 posters, no more than 7, please. 3 key messages in each poster, 3 visuals in each poster. The benefits from doing these is really good, and then a lot of successful outcomes have come by having these. They provide a variety of information because not everybody comes there with the same question. They have different questions and different levels of interest. You can have multiple subject matter experts running around engaging people in one-to-one conversations. You can answer more questions. You can allow for the community to participate without grandstanding. And it minimizes this concept of us versus them. It's more of a we. And it's a much better place, much stronger position to be in. And it's also much easier to fix any mistakes you might have made. Participants, we have 3 types. You have greeters, Walmart greeters, whatever. Set the tone, explain the format. You have subject matter experts, and you have floaters or rovers. They tend to be people with the general knowledge or often management or public affairs people to roam around the audience. Layer information, again, the message map concept. Start with a simple message, add detail. Why you do this? Because people are different. They have different levels of information, different education, background, and so on. And the questions, an individual's questions of desire information are different. If they're a town hall and everybody's talking about something they don't want to hear about, they just feel like they're being ignored, even though they're not necessarily being ignored. In an open house public exchange, they can go where they want, they can get the level of information they want, and generally it's a much better outcome. Again, layers. Layer 1 is posters, fact sheets. Layer 2 is your SMEs. Layer 3 is additional reference materials. For the posters, briefly, they should highlight conclusions, not contain every detail, every scientific knowledge. They should have a major message or topic to explain. Supporting messages make up different sections of the poster. Each message may have 3 or 4 supporting facts. Again, the layered information. Our SMEs develop key message and a summary talk for their posters. They anticipate, provide reference materials, only answer on the topic agendas, and know where to send people for questions that are beyond their expertise. In training presenters, again, importance of nonverbals, getting that right, avoiding the negatives, expressing caring, empathy, and using visuals. I like this visual here because I asked, can anybody explain to me the droplet transmission of influenza? I just don't understand it. Yeah. Yeah. That poster requires no text, all right? It doesn't require a subject. It's just there. I mean, that's a powerful visual. Right? There's at least 1,000 words there. Okay. Layer 3, additional reference materials, copies of posters, fact sheets, raw data, technical documents. Here's where the details can be. Challenge to open house, of course, it's a large manpower requirement, a large amount of education materials to develop and produce. Training practice is crucial. If you do decide to do these, make sure you practice. It usually takes a couple of days. Day 1, you issue overview, team development, review the materials, and day 2 would be like going live or a mock with media, and you can even have you can do a mock media or mock meeting. These are very useful in getting people on the game. Mock meetings, you have non-team members act as the public, get them in role play if you can, and yeah, encourage team to role play and practice delivering key messages. And encourage them to test the subject matter experts and of course, media practice if you can. So again, principles of information, of engagement is transparency, education, outreach, really important. So finally, I want to close here is, do you think we can improve? How can we compete in this environment? Are there things that we can do to compete in this environment, given all the information I've tried to share with you in the past hour? And what are the best tools and techniques? And I've hoped that I've tried to address at least part of those questions in this last hour. There's a card that I'm going to put out there. It's a little wallet card. It's kind of cool. It's got common questions asked by the media, tips for breaking bad news. It has my name and my partner, Vincent Cavello, and our phone numbers and some websites. And a book we published. And the book has a lot of materials. It's all available free online, PDFs. You can just download them. And I want to close with today's random medical news. I looked in the paper this morning, and it just happens to be that coffee can cause depression in twins. There it is. Okay, coffee, depression, twins. You got it. Okay, so with that, life is uncertain. I do suggest you eat dessert first, and I'd be happy to take your questions.